After the independence, government passed more than 40 central labor legislations, but these legislation have benefited only workers employed in the organized sector, when in actual fact about 93% of labor falls into category of unorganized sector. Households are not prominently regarded as place of work like industries and factories in labor law. Since domestic workers are employed in homes, they are excluded from the basic laws that guarantee job safety and personal security like the Minimum Wages Act 1948, Maternity Benefit Act 1961, Workmen's Compensation Act 1923 and Interstate Migrant Workers Act 1979 and so on. Domestic workers considered as unorganized labor and often part-time, they do not have contracts, do not fall under labor legislation, may have no health or accident insurance and are arbitrarily paid dependent on what employers considers fair. There is a desperate need for domestic workers to organize and educate themselves effectively to improve their working conditions and terms, mainly because their employers are in an economically superior position in society. While there are millions of domestic workers in our country, one cannot permit such a massive proportion of our population to remain ungoverned outside the law. In a country where 93% of workforce is in the unorganized sector and therefore beyond the purview of most labor laws, domestic workers represent a new law in terms of disempowerment. They are not even recognized as workers. Their work, cooking, cleaning, dishwashing, babysitting is not recognized as work by the state. Neither the Maternity Benefits Act nor the Minimum Wages Act or any of the scores of other labor laws applied to domestic work. Domestic workers can be hired and fired at will. 60% of domestic workers were not paid in lockdown, faced poverty, debt and hunger. The employer has no legally binding obligations. There is no legal parameter protecting the rights of the domestic worker. Domestic workers perform vital care work in millions of middle class and wealthy households across the country, thereby allowing the men and women of these homes to participate in the labor force. So why has the policy response to domestic workers been so lethargic? A confluence of prevailing class, caste and gender attitudes seems to constitute the bedrock of the resistance to policy change. There has been an attempt at creating a law within the country in the form of Domestic Workers Welfare and Social Security Act 2010 bill drafted by the National Commission for Women. But little progress has been made in passing this bill so far. India's new labor code won't help much for domestic workers because individual households are not recognized as workplaces. Domestic workers in India are forced to be dependent on their employers because they have no legal protection as workers under India's labor laws and no bargaining power due to their situation of poverty, illiteracy and low skills. Among the formal workforce, bonus, appraisals and allowance are commonly discussed issues. But these domestic workers continue to work for the same salary for years. Policy makers have rarely taken domestic workers' need into account.